Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Neil. I am the CTO at Gig Werks, and I'm happy to be taking you through this webinar today, which is going to be exploring the hybrid features in SharePoint Online. So before we begin, just a little bit about us. Gig Werks is an award-winning solutions partner. We've been in the industry since 2001, started as advanced infrastructure, won a number of awards around that, and then really around 2006, 2007, we started focusing on sort of the Microsoft stack of SharePoint and SharePoint-related technologies. A couple of years back, obviously, everyone felt the big shift in the cloud, and that's also where we've been focusing a lot of our energies in the last couple of years, and also launching our product line, which we call Project Ready. For those interested after this webinar or beyond, we do offer a number of different solutions, sort of Kickstarter workshops that we offer in terms of, you know, folks wanting to get on board with Office 365. And also with Nintex, we have a strong partnership as well. We have a Kickstarter around that. So we do recommend you to take a look at those. A little bit about Project Ready. This is a collaborative suite of applications that runs on the cloud or on-prem. It's geared towards the legal and architectural industries. Essentially, it runs on top of, you know, the SharePoint platform. Gives you a lot of great capabilities around task roll-ups management, document control suite. And some of the folks I'm sure that have seen some of our previous webinars have seen this before. But if not, I definitely do recommend you check this out. It is really a great solution. So let's kick off right into what we're here to talk about today, and that is the hybrid scenarios that you can now take benefit of in Office 365 and SharePoint on-prem with SharePoint 2016. Obviously, this is sort of like the kickoff slide about the cloud in general. I don't really need to sell the sort of benefits of the cloud. I'm sure a lot of folks know that. But obviously, you know, the trends and everything in between that's moving pretty much all towards the cloud. And this pretty much sums it up. You know, you got, you know, all the sort of revenue and gains you get from not having to manage your infrastructure, but also with that option of the hybrid. So, you know, you hear a lot about the cloud in general. You hear about the cloud from, you know, Amazon and Google. We would really argue that Microsoft is uniquely positioned to, you know, not just, you know, bring you to the cloud, but also give you that choice. So if there are certain things that you want to leave on premises, and, you know, because of certain secure applications or databases, you have that hybrid scenario. You can run certain applications on-prem, but also push out into the cloud the things that make sense for that scenario. Some of the key scenarios that we see with hybrid today, and this one sort of talks about a little bit more even from the Azure standpoint. You know, Azure is sort of Microsoft's main cloud offering in terms of services and infrastructure, and it comes in many different flavors. Obviously, you've got virtualization technologies, the ability to run virtual machines and VMs and other services, and then even things that, you know, folks traditionally might not have even thought of moving to the cloud. You know, things like Active Directory. Now you have Azure AD, and so, you know, they're really giving you that power of the choice, but they're forward thinking in the sense that, you know, if you want to go totally cloud, you have that option. If you need to remain in that sort of hybrid scenario, which I think at least today most folks are probably in one way or another some sort of a hybrid, you do have choice with the Azure platform. So the focus of the hybrid scenarios we wanted to at least talk about today were around SharePoint. So what are those scenarios and functions that really make sense for hybrid within the SharePoint realm? And those we really see around things like OneDrive for Business, the ability to search, video and delve, And this is sort of sums up a lot of those major features. There's going to be more features coming down the pike, obviously, as they get more sort of hybrid scenarios. But this really underscores sort of the commitment that Microsoft has towards hybrid and also towards SharePoint on-premises. So they've been very clear about SharePoint 2016 and beyond, that there's going to be additional versions of SharePoint on-premises, that's not going away. Whatever choice you pick, they're going to always, basically give you that power of choice. Now, one of the trends that you will see, at least in terms of the SharePoint scenario, is that a lot of features are going to be coming out cloud first, and they always sort of hark on this cloud first sort of mantra, and that's really because that's really where the future is. So a lot of the new features are probably going to come out in the cloud scenario first, in Office 365 and so on. Essentially, how they're going to support on-premises customers is using a series of what they're going to call feature packs. So obviously, SharePoint 2016 came out a couple months ago. Basically brought it up to par with a lot of the features that we've already been seeing in Office 365 the last couple of years. But as in usual in Office 365, they are just constantly releasing new features and updating features and enhancing the capabilities, and they really do that. If not weekly, at least monthly. There's always new things every time I log in. In terms of the on-premises customers, the way they're going to handle that is they're not going to have that same sort of rapid-fire pace of update. But they are going to do at least yearly, is what I've heard, yearly feature packs that is going to bring on par a lot of the things that you see in Office 365. Obviously, some of the benefits you realize with hybrid is, whatever services you do put out into the cloud, you have that sort of anywhere device connectivity capability, whether it's mobile devices or tablets. Pretty much any device anywhere is the benefit of the cloud. You really are a mobile worker wherever you are. As long as you have a phone, you can access your data and so on. And obviously, you've got all the secure and accessibility features as well. So Microsoft is really one of the most secure clouds there is out there. You've never heard of any break-in in terms of Microsoft security. I mean, everybody would have heard of it by now, and that's because they really have the best security there is out there in terms of your data and other data. One of the webinars that we've had recently, you might have seen a feature called Customer Lockbox. Microsoft themselves, they don't even have access to your data. If you have to have a technician, from Microsoft go in and look at it, you actually have to give them permission to do so. And it really sort of underscores that commitment that Microsoft has to security. So let's talk a little bit more about this sort of SharePoint and Office 365 hybrid. You've got the increased flexibility. You've got the power of Azure. Data centers across the globe. Really powerful access, and then also the expanding sort of infrastructure. They're constantly building these massive new data centers, and they'd also give you a lot of power in terms of region and locality. So if you want to keep your data in a certain location, they are constantly giving you more controls around that, compliance for government and HIPAA and so on. So they've really been on the forefront in terms of this sort of compatibility and accessibility of the data. So the first feature that I want to focus on is this federated search. So this was one of the first hybrid features to come out, and I think it really was sort of a no-brainer in terms of hybrid. Is you've got data on premises, you've got data in the cloud. You don't want your users to go and have to hit two different data sources to find anything that they're looking for. So this sort of unified search capability was one of the first things that they came out with, and I think it really makes sense. The way this works is that essentially you install a couple of connectors on your SharePoint 2016 server. This also supports SharePoint 2013 as well, not SharePoint 2010. But essentially, it would allow the cloud-based Office 365 search index to go and actually crawl the information that you have on your on-premise SharePoint server. So what this results in is that you can go to a single sort of, SharePoint search results, see results from both cloud and on-prem, and at the end of the day, you really want to make it transparent to those end users. They don't really care where the data is, they just want to be able to get to their data, and they don't want to go to two different places to do it. One caveat around this feature is that this one only would work in the cloud version of the search results page, so that's really where you're going to want your search experience to be, is in the cloud, because it's able to show you that unified sort of experience. So it doesn't really go the other way around in terms of the on-premises version of SharePoint crawling the cloud. They don't have that yet. So for right now, this federated search capability is limited to doing it from the cloud interface. So, and this also sort of gives you another scenario, which is BCS. So the ability to actually get at data, whether it's in the cloud or on premises. BCS, which stands for Business Connectivity Services, has been around for many years, even before even the cloud came out in terms of Office 365. Gives you the ability to go into external data sources such as SQL databases or so on, and actually present them within SharePoint as lists or metadata, so that you can reference that authoritative data. So one of the other hybrid scenarios they have is this hybrid BCS, so the ability for the cloud to actually go out and grab data from on-premises in order to show within that BCS interface. So you could think of a scenario where you have, an application like a SQL application, and you need to get at, a client list for accessing, for tagging documents. This is a great scenario to use hybrid BCS. The next big one is hybrid OneDrive for Business. And essentially the way this works is, those of you who have used OneDrive, you're probably very familiar with at least the consumer version of OneDrive. OneDrive for Business is pretty much the same concept as your OneDrive home, except it runs in Office 365. It's designed for sort of the enterprise business documents. And one of the great things about moving to the cloud is you get 1 terabyte of storage per OneDrive for Business account. I mean, think about the amount of infrastructure you would just have to purchase in order to sort of accommodate that scenario on premises. I mean, you'd have to have tons of storage, tons of availability. So, and OneDrive for Business is really designed as sort of like people's personal folders. And a lot of folks who haven't even moved to SharePoint, they have like this on a file share or a file system. And this to me is really a no-brainer. Essentially, the way it would work is, you could have SharePoint 2016 running on premises, all of your sort of intranet-related data there. But when the user goes and clicks on their OneDrive site, they're going to be redirected to a cloud site. And that experience, that hybrid experience, is really quite seamless. So, to the end user, they may not even know that they've stored data, data storage, which is great, have that hardware capability. So I think the OneDrive for Business scenario is a great one to use. Next up is Yammer. So some folks have taken a look at Yammer. This has been a really great sort of collaborative environment for folks as an enterprise social network is really how they're pitching it. It's got chat capabilities. It's got a lot of really powerful discussion boards and so on, and it really creates this full-on Facebook-like social experience for the enterprise. And it's something that's only runs in the cloud today. They don't have any, on-prem version of Yammer yet, but this really kind of fills a great sort of void, if you will, in SharePoint. SharePoint doesn't really, it has certain social capabilities, but it doesn't really have something really at the level of Yammer, which is, really powerful social sort of scenarios, the ability to, have very powerful discussion boards and replies and things of that nature. So this is another great sort of scenario to have a hybrid. You can have your SharePoint on-prem, but then for more of these sort of like FAQ type of, discussion board capability, I would really recommend Yammer for that. Also, what they're doing in terms of the interface, the user interface, is some of you might have seen that lately they've actually been updating the SharePoint user interface. They've announced quite a lot of innovations in the last couple months that's either been released or will be released this year. One of those was the SharePoint mobile app, but also SharePoint in of itself is really getting a major facelift. So a lot of the different sort of interfaces that you're used to, things like document libraries, team sites, all of those are getting a big makeover. And what they're really doing in terms of hybrid is giving you this ability to access your team sites in one place. So when you go into Office 365 now and you say, I want to look at my SharePoint sites, you're going to get this really nice new sort of interface, shows you all of your recent sites that you've pinned or frequently visit. And in terms of hybrid, it'll show you all of your sites both in the cloud and on premises. And that's a great thing because you can essentially just go to one place, see all your favorite sites, but not have to navigate to two different systems in order to get that feature. And we've talked a little bit about OneDrive for Business, this ability to use the hybrid version of OneDrive for Business. This is essentially available both in SharePoint 2013 from the Service Pack 1 to SharePoint 2016. Another one is video. So those of you who may have seen the video capabilities, I'm sure you'd agree. I mean, it really is quite impressive what they're doing with Office 365 video. It's pretty much like an enterprise-wide YouTube. You can publish videos, you can render them to all kinds of different devices and codecs and so on, and it supports things like adaptive streaming for folks with low latency internet devices. So it's just a great, sort of cloud YouTube on your own sort of network. But again, just the resources and the infrastructure you'd need to set this up is pretty mind-boggling. I mean, it really is a powerful video solution. And this isn't even something that they've released yet on SharePoint 2016. So in terms of this sort of video capability, right now you're pretty much limited to the cloud. But again, another great sort of hybrid scenario. Another one is the ability to do extranet sites. So one of the really great things that Office 365 does, I think uniquely well on top of SharePoint on premises, is the ability to work with folks outside of your organization, what they call external users. So simply open up a share dialog, type in the person's email address, they register for a Microsoft account, and they're in. And it's, pretty much getting that same capability on premises. There's a whole bunch of things you got to set up. There's forms-based authentication, and even at the end of the day, you're still not going to get that same sort of great experience that they've hit with when online. So extranet sites is another great hybrid scenario. You could think of all your sort of sensitive intranet documents, leave those on premises, but then wherever you're going to want to collaborate with somebody externally, instead of setting up all these complex networking and infrastructure sort of things that go with that, just use SharePoint Online for extranet sites. It works great. It's available already today. Again, simply just type in the person's email address, and you can share and collaborate on documents. Other sort of great capabilities that right now only live in the cloud are things like Office Delve, which leverages what they call the Office Graph. So if you've seen Delve, essentially you could think of it as like search on steroids. It instead of going and finding content, the content comes and finds you. Supports really rich, nice previews and this card-like interface. This is only available on the cloud today. So there is no on-premises version of Delve. But again, if you're using that search connector, which crawls both the on-premises and SharePoint Online data, you can leverage the great interface of Delve, but have the benefit of hybrid data in terms of what you can actually see. Another thing that they've brought to SharePoint 2016 is this concept of the app launcher. So folks who have used SharePoint on premises, some of the older versions of SharePoint, you're quite familiar with the site actions sort of interface. And in SharePoint Online, they released this thing called the app launcher, which kind of goes beyond just the SharePoint service because there's all these other services to take advantage of. So what they're essentially doing is they're unifying the two experiences. If you have SharePoint 2016, you're going to get this app launcher experience. And what they will be releasing later on is the ability to have sort of common tiles between the two. If you want to get started with hybrid, the best place I would first recommend is to actually log into SharePoint Online, and they have what's called a hybrid interface. I actually have it up here. Let me just show you guys real quick. So if you log into SharePoint Online, you go to the Admin Center, then you go ahead and you access SharePoint, and at the very bottom, you'll see Configure Hybrid. And from here, it really gets you started in terms of some of those scenarios that we were talking about, things like extranet sites, OneDrive for Business, and so on. So this is really a great sort of page that gets you going. And of course, we do also recommend checking out a lot of the other services that they have in SharePoint Online if you're going to go that route. Obviously, there's hosted Exchange, hosted Link, a whole other sort of range of things that can fill that hybrid scenario. Maybe you're not ready to move to SharePoint Online, but you definitely want to use Exchange in the cloud. So, and that is something that we have seen a lot of folks do. In terms of some of the things that I mentioned before, this data, this trust for how good their security is, pretty much don't take my word for it. SharePoint Online, they have this thing they call the Trust Center, where they really talk about all of the different scenarios and how high tech their security policies are, and they're very transparent about it. So I definitely recommend checking that out. So that pretty much brings us to the conclusion of our presentation.
So thank you very much again, and all of you again for joining us today. I hope you can join us for future webcasts, and look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good day, folks.